We're joined by the Director of RedBridge Group, Simon Welsh. Simon, you've been speaking to these focus groups in recent weeks. What are they telling you?
Yeah, g'day, Laura. There's a lot of pessimism right now out there in voterland, and it's primarily economic. The cost of living crisis, if I can call it that, is really starting to bite. People are feeling it from all directions. I'm thinking last night of a woman in one of our groups last night who was talking about needing to take her child to a GP that didn't bulk bill and having to make a choice between taking that appointment and cutting back on her groceries, sacrificing food in order to be able to afford these bills. So it's really biting across the board. Even folk that are in, what they would self-describe as well-paying jobs sort of look at their jobs and go, well, I've seen some of my friends lose their jobs recently that they thought were secure and well-paying. So I'm not feeling too confident. And in all of this, the dreaded R word is starting to loom in focus groups. Participants are talking about recession. So there's this expectation, there's this expectations that things aren't great, and they're probably going to get worse. So yeah, it's pretty grim going at the moment out there doing this type of work.
So are they blaming any particular government, state or federal?
Yeah, this is really interesting. It's actually quite. You might expect sort of a visceral kind of anger around this sort of threat to people's well-being and their quality of life, but it's actually quite a nuanced response. So what people are saying is they're looking at this and they're going, it's war in Ukraine. Yes, it's the lingering effects of a global pandemic. That they're almost kind of philosophical about it, and even making points like, climate change has got a role to play in this because, part of the grocery prices is to do with the floods in Queensland and New South Wales and these sorts of things. So they're quite reflective and nuanced about it. But I think what is interesting is when you then talk to them about, well, how do we get through this? There is a clear expectation of governments to act and intervene in the economy. And there's a real tension here in that, yes, there's concerns around government debt and these sorts of things. They don't want to see debt unnecessarily explode, but there is this expectation of intervention, and so it's a dance that I think governments both federally and at state levels are going to have to find a way through of how do we spend in a way that's not seen as being wasteful. It's seen to be good, well-targeted spending, which is easy to say, and the focus groups say it, and it's easy to say, but it's much harder to do, because that expectation of intervention, I think, means that if we get 2 or 3 years down the track and things are as bad as people are currently expecting, I think that philosophical nuanced view then starts to evaporate because there is this expectation that government can and could do something about this.
When there's so much pessimism around, people worried about a recession, about their jobs, even though it's the strongest job market in history, how, in your view or in your research, does this shape election outcomes? Is this likely to be a positive? And, is this a crisis? Does that adage, you don't change government in a crisis, apply here in Victoria? Or is something else going on?
Everything at the moment is going, on the political front, everything is sort of going through this filter of how does this help me get back to stability in my life? And I think to the extent that incumbent governments can present a pathway through this, then I think you do have a positive incumbency kind of effect there. If you're seen to be a shambolic government that's adding to instability in people's lives, then I think there's a reverse effect. So here in Victoria at the moment, I think the broad thread in our work and indeed in some of the polling that we're seeing is that the Labor government here is probably more on the returning stability to people's lives. They're making announcements around health and the economy and these sorts of things that is adding to that perception. So I think at the moment there's an incumbency benefit for the Victorian government. But yeah, it's a tricky, slippery little landscape, and it wouldn't take much for them to slip into that area of being seen as adding to instability.